Commander Sarah Chun gripped the controls of her shuttle as it dropped through Earth's burning sky. Red warning lights flashed across her control panel. The air outside was thick with black smoke and strange green clouds that ate through metal like acid. "Last sweep, Commander," her pilot Jake said. His voice was tight with fear. "We need to leave in 10 minutes or we won't make it to the jump point." Sarah looked at the scanner screen. Most of it showed nothing but death. The cities were gone. The forests were gone. Even the oceans had turned a sick yellow color. But there was one small dot on her screen that might be a person still alive. "There," she pointed. "Building complex at grid 77, take us down." Jake shook his head. "Commander, that's too close to the hives." "Those things will smell us coming." Sarah had seen the hives. They were huge towers of black and green that the aliens had built all over Earth. Strange creatures came out of them. Things with too many legs and eyes that glowed in the dark. They killed anything human they found. "We don't leave anyone behind," Sarah said. "That's what makes us human." The shuttle dropped lower. Through the front window, Sarah could see the ruins of what used to be New Geneva. The medical research center where her brother had worked was nothing but broken concrete and twisted metal. She pushed away the thought of him. There was no time for grief now. The scanner beeped. One life sign, weak but steady, coming from the basement levels of the medical building. Jake set the shuttle down in a small clearing between the rubble. The engines made too much noise. If the aliens heard them, they would all die. "Briggs, Martinez, you're with me," Sarah said to her 2 soldiers. "Jake, keep the engines warm. If you see anything moving that isn't us, take off. Don't wait." "I won't leave you, Commander. That's an order, pilot." Sarah grabbed her rifle and breathing mask. The air outside would kill a human in minutes without protection. The alien plague was everywhere now. It got into your lungs and ate you from the inside out. She had seen what it did to people. It was not a good way to die. The 3 humans ran across the broken ground. Every shadow could hide an alien scout. Every sound could mean death was coming. Sarah's heart beat so loud she was sure the aliens could hear it. The medical building had a hole blasted in its side. They climbed through carefully. Inside, emergency lights still flickered. Most of the building had collapsed, but the basement levels were built strong. They might have protected someone. "Down here," Briggs whispered. He pointed to a stairway that went into darkness. They went down step by step. The air got thicker. Strange smells filled their masks. Something had died down here, but the scanner still showed one human life sign. "Hello?" Sarah called softly. "Is anyone there? We're human. We're here to help." A weak voice answered from deep in the rubble. "Here, I'm here. Can't move." They found him trapped under a fallen beam, Dr. Marcus Webb, according to the name tag on his torn coat. He was older, maybe 50, with gray hair and blood on his face. But his eyes were alert and he was clutching something against his chest. "Easy, Doctor," Sarah said as Briggs and Martinez lifted the beam. "We're getting you out." "The data," Webb gasped. "Have to save the data. I found something. About them." "About how they work?" He held up a small metal cylinder, a data core. His hands shook, but he wouldn't let go of it. "What kind of data?" Sarah asked as they helped him stand. "Their plague. I know how it works now, how it changes, how it spreads." Webb coughed and blood came up. "We can fight it, we can beat it. But I need time. I need a lab." The building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Through the broken walls, they could hear sounds that made Sarah's skin crawl. Clicking noises, wet sliding sounds. The aliens were coming. "Move," Sarah ordered. They half-carried Webb up the stairs. Outside, the sky was getting darker. Not from night, but from the huge ships that were dropping from orbit. Harvesters, they called them. Each one was the size of a city, and they came to clean up after the plague had done its work. Jake had the shuttle ready. The engines were running hot, and the landing lights cut through the green fog. But between them and safety, shapes were moving in the rubble. Long, black things with too many joints. They moved like spiders, but they were bigger than cars. "Run," Sarah said. The aliens saw them. They made sounds like screaming metal and started moving fast. Too fast. Briggs turned and fired his rifle. The energy beams lit up the fog and hit two of the creatures. They fell, but more kept coming. Martinez threw a grenade. The explosion bought them seconds. They reached the shuttle and Jake had the door open. Sarah pushed Webb inside first, then Briggs, then Martinez. Go, go, go. The shuttle lifted off just as the largest alien reached them. Its claws scraped against the hull as they rose into the burning sky. Jake pushed the engines to full power and they shot up through the clouds. Behind them, Earth was dying. The harvesters were landing everywhere now. Each one dropped more of the black hives. Soon there would be nothing left but alien cities built on the bones of humanity. Jump point in 2 minutes. Jake reported. Sarah looked at Dr. Webb. He was unconscious now, but still holding the data core. Such a small thing, it looked like nothing special. But if what he said was true, it might be the only hope humanity had left. Commander, Martinez said. He was looking at the rear scanner. Those harvester ships. They're not just landing. They're doing something else. Sarah looked at the screen. The huge alien ships were connected by beams of light. Energy was flowing between them in patterns too complex to understand. As she watched, the beams grew brighter and started reaching out toward space. They're scanning, she realized, looking for escape ships. Looking for us. Jake's hands flew over the controls. Jump in 30 seconds. But Commander, if they lock onto us? They won't. Sarah hoped she was right. Humans are hard to kill. They're about to learn that. The jump drive engaged. Space twisted around them and Earth vanished. For a moment they were between dimensions, in the place where distance meant nothing. Then they were back in normal space, light years away from home. Behind them, Earth burned. Ahead of them was empty space and uncertain exile. In her arms, Dr. Webb stirred and opened his eyes. Did we make it? He whispered. We made it, Doctor. Good. He held up the data core again. Then we can begin. Sarah didn't understand what he meant then. She thought they were refugees now. Survivors running from a war they had already lost. She thought they would spend the rest of their lives hiding from the creatures that had destroyed their world. She was wrong. The aliens had made a mistake. They had let one human live long enough to learn their secrets. They had given humanity something more dangerous than any weapon. They had given them knowledge. And humans, Sarah would learn, were very good at turning knowledge into revenge. But that would come later. For now, they were just 3 soldiers and 1 scientist in a small ship running into the dark between the stars. Earth was gone, home was gone. Everyone they had ever loved was probably dead. But they were alive. And as long as even one human drew breath, the war was not over. It was just beginning. The shuttle flew on through space, carrying its precious cargo toward an uncertain future. In the distance, other human ships were making the same journey. Refugees and survivors, scientists and soldiers, all running from the same nightmare. They didn't know it yet, but they were carrying something the aliens had never faced before. They were carrying the memory of Earth, the memory of blue skies and green forests. The memory of children playing in parks and families gathering for dinner. The aliens thought they had destroyed humanity. They thought the survivors would scatter and die alone in the cold of space. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Humans remember, humans learn. And when humans are pushed far enough, they push back harder than their enemies ever imagined possible. The data core in Dr. Webb's hands contained more than scientific information. It contained the seeds of humanity's return. The beginning of a plan that would take decades to complete, but would end with fire and fury falling on every alien world. The creatures that destroyed Earth had made one fatal error. They had shown mercy to their enemies. They had let one human live. And that was going to be enough. 50 years had passed since Earth died. The human survivors had built new homes on worlds that tried to kill them every day. Worlds with air too thin to breathe and gravity too heavy for human bones. Worlds where the rain was acid and the soil was poison, but humans were stubborn. They learned to live where nothing should live. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the battleship Vengeance and looked out at the fleet she had spent half her life building. 200 ships hung in the darkness around the planet. Kepler Prime, they were not pretty ships. They were built for war, not for show. Each ship was covered in armor, plating made from the bones of giant creatures that lived in the deep caves of Kepler. Each ship carried weapons that could turn mountains into dust. Each ship was crewed by men and women who had never seen Earth but who knew what the aliens had done to their home. "Admiral," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Captain Rodriguez approaching. He was young, born on Kepler, but his eyes held the same hard look that all the colonists had. "Dr. Webb wants to see you. He says it's urgent." Sarah nodded. Dr. Webb was old now, almost 90, but his mind was still sharp. For 50 years he had worked in his laboratory, studying the alien plague that had killed Earth, learning its secrets. Finding its weaknesses, the laboratory was deep underground, protected by layers of rock and metal. The old man was bent over a microscope when Sarah arrived. His hair was white now and his hands shook, but his voice was still strong. "Sarah," he said without looking up. "Come see this. I think I've finally done it." Sarah looked into the microscope. She saw something that looked like tiny green worms, swimming in a drop of liquid. They moved fast, twisting and turning like they were trying to escape. "What am I looking at, Marcus?" "The alien plague, but changed." "Improved?" Webb's eyes gleamed with excitement. "For 50 years I've been studying how it works, how it kills, how it spreads, and now I know how to make it kill them instead of—" "Yes," Sarah straightened up. "You can make it work against the aliens? Better than that, I can make it hunt them. Seek them out. Kill only them and leave everything else alive." Webb held up a small vial filled with green liquid. "This is their own weapon turned against them. Justice, Sarah. Pure justice." Sarah took the vial and held it up to the light. "Such a small thing. But if Webb was right, it could be the key to everything. How long before you can make more?" "Give me 6 months? I can produce enough to fill the warheads of every missile in your fleet." Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. 6 months. Good, because we're going to need it." She led Webb to the command center where her staff was waiting. The big screen showed a map of local space with red dots marking alien positions. There were a lot of red dots. "Report," Sarah ordered. Commander Vega, her intelligence chief, stepped forward. "Long-range scouts confirm it, Admiral. The Scourge are expanding toward our sector. 3 probe fleets detected in the Tau systems. They're moving this way." Sarah studied the map. "The Scourge. That's what they called the aliens now? It was a good name? They moved through space like a disease, killing everything they touched. How long do we have?" she asked. 2 years, maybe 3 before they reach our outer colonies. After that, ... Vega shrugged. "They'll find us." Sarah had known this day would come. The human colonies had been hidden for 50 years, but the Scourge kept expanding. Sooner or later they would stumble across humanity's new home. The question was what to do. "About it?" "Options?" Sarah asked. "We could run again," said Captain Park. "Load the civilian population on transports and find new worlds to hide on." Sarah shook her head. "No, we've run far enough. This is where we make our stand." "Admiral," Commander Vega said carefully, "our fleet is strong, but the Scourge have numbers. They could send 1,000 ships against us. Then we don't fight them ship to ship, we fight them smart." Sarah called up new images on the screen. Pictures of Scourge ships taken by human spies over the years. The aliens built their vessels like living things. Organic hulls that could heal damage. Weapons that grew from the ship's body like claws. "They think like a hive," Sarah continued. "Everything connected, everything working together. That's their strength, but it's also their weakness. Cut the connections and the hive falls apart. What are you thinking, Admiral?" Webb asked. Sarah smiled again. This time it was worse than before. "I'm thinking it's time to go home." The room went quiet. Home meant Earth. Earth meant flying straight into the heart of Scourge territory. "Admiral," Captain Rodriguez said slowly, "that's suicide. Earth is their central base now. They have hundreds of hive cities there, maybe thousands." "Exactly. Which is why they won't expect us, Sarah turned to face her officers. For 50 years we've been planning for this moment. Building ships, training crews, learning everything we can about our enemy. Now it's time to use what we've learned. She called up new images. These showed the human colonies. Not the pretty parts that the civilians saw, but the military bases. The training grounds. The factories. Kepler Prime looked like a fortress world. The mountains were carved into gun positions. The valleys were filled with missile silos. The orbital stations bristled with weapons, but the other colonies were different. Kepler 2 was covered in shipyards where the fleet was built. Kepler 3 was one giant laboratory where scientists studied alien technology. Kepler 4 was where they trained the special forces. The children born on these worlds had never known peace. They grew up learning to fight, learning to hate the creatures that had destroyed their parents' world. They were harder than the refugees. From Earth, stronger, more dangerous. We have something the Scourge have never faced, Sarah continued. We have people who know how to fight and hide and strike from the shadows. We have ships built specifically to kill their kind. And now, thanks to Dr. Webb, we have their own plague turned against them. She looked around the room at her staff. These were the children of Earth's survivors, born in exile, raised for war. The Scourge think they exterminated humanity 50 years ago. They think we're just scattered refugees hiding in the dark. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Captain Park raised his hand. What's the plan, Admiral? Phase 1, we disappear. Make it look like we've abandoned our colonies and run deeper into space. Let the Scourge scouts find empty worlds. And Phase 2? Phase 2, we go home. Small teams, stealth ships, moving through their territory like ghosts. We plant sensors. We gather intelligence. We learn how they've changed Earth. Phase 3? Rodriguez asked. Sarah's eyes gleamed. Phase 3, we remind them why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The meeting broke up with orders flying in all directions. Ships to be prepared, supplies to be loaded. Families to be relocated to the deep bunkers that had been prepared for this day, but Sarah stayed behind with Dr. Webb. Are you sure about the plague? She asked. It will really work? Webb nodded. Better than their original version. See, the Scourge made one mistake when they designed their weapon. They made it too perfect, too focused on human biology. It can't adapt to fight other species, but your version can? My version is smarter. It learns, it changes. It will hunt down every Scourge organism it finds and destroy them from the inside out. Webb's old eyes burned with hatred. Just like they did to us. Sarah nodded. How many people know about this? Just us. I thought it better to keep it quiet for now. Good, let's keep it that way. When the time comes, I want it to be a surprise, Webb smiled. It was the first time Sarah had seen the old man truly happy in years. They saved one of us, he said. Biggest mistake they ever made, Sarah agreed. The Scourge had shown mercy once. They had let one human scientist live long enough to escape with their secrets. That small act of mercy was going to destroy them, but that was still years away. First they had to get to Earth. First they had to survive the journey through hostile space. First they had to prove that humans could do more than just hide and run. Sarah walked back to the observation deck and looked out at her fleet again. In a few days they would scatter to the deep space bases. The civilians would think they were running away again. The Scourge scouts would find empty colonies and assume the humans had fled, but they wouldn't be running. They would be preparing. 50 years of exile was enough. 50 years of building and planning and waiting was enough. It was time to go home. It was time to remind the galaxy that humanity was still alive. And when humans came home, they always brought war with them. Admiral Sarah Chun floated in zero gravity as her stealth ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Through the armored viewport, she could see the sun that had once warmed Earth. It looked the same as she remembered from 50 years ago, but everything else was wrong. Sensors are picking up massive energy signatures throughout the system, reported Lieutenant Hayes, her navigation officer. Admiral, there are structures around every planet. Even the gas giants. Sarah pulled herself to the command station and looked at the display. Her heart sank. The Scourge had not just taken Earth, they had claimed the entire system. Rings of dark metal surrounded Jupiter and Saturn. Mining platforms stripped asteroids down to nothing. Strange towers rose from the surfaces of dead moons. "Take us in slowly," she ordered. "Silent running. If they detect us, we're dead." The ship moved deeper into the system like a ghost. It was built for this kind of work. No energy signatures, no heat trails. Just another piece of space debris drifting in the dark, but it was Earth. That made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. The planet that had been blue and green and white was now a sickly yellow-brown. Thick clouds covered most of the surface. Where the clouds broke, she could see things that made her sick. Vast hives that rose like mountains from the continents. Webs of glowing veins that connected them across the oceans. The planet pulsed, with alien life like a diseased heart. "My God," whispered Hayes, "what did they do to it?" Sarah had seen the reports from their long-range scouts. She thought she was prepared. But seeing Earth like this was different. This was personal. "They turned it into a breeding world," she said. "Every Scourge ship that attacks another system is born down there." The ship continued its silent approach. Sarah's mission was simple: get close enough to plant monitoring devices. Learn how the Scourge had organized their defenses. Find weaknesses that the fleet could exploit when the real attack came. But as they drew closer, Sarah realized they had a chance to do more than just observe. "There," she pointed to a section of the planet where the clouds were thinner. "The Geneva region, can you get us down there without being detected?" Hayes studied his instruments. "Maybe, but Admiral, landing on Earth is not part of the mission. Command wants us to stay in orbit. Command isn't here." "I am," Sarah's voice was cold. "Take us down." The ship slipped through Earth's poisoned atmosphere like a falling star. The air outside was thick with spores and chemicals that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. But their environmental suits would keep them alive long enough to do what needed to be done. They landed in the ruins of New Geneva, not far from where Sarah had rescued Dr. Webb 50 years ago. The landscape was almost unrecognizable. Where buildings had once stood, twisted towers of organic material reached toward the sky. Strange plants with glowing pods covered everything. Sarah and her team moved carefully through the alien jungle that had grown over their old home. Every shadow could hide a Scourge warrior. Every sound could bring death down on them. "This way," Sarah said, following her suit's navigation system. "The medical complex should be just ahead." They found it eventually. The building where they had saved Dr. Webb was still there, but it was covered in the same alien growth as everything else. Thick vines with thorns as long as swords wrapped around the walls. Flowers that looked like eyes watched them pass. "Why are we here, Admiral?" asked Sergeant King, her security chief. "Because I have a feeling the Scourge keep records. And if they do, those records will tell us things we need to know." They made their way down into the basement levels. The alien growth was thicker here, but the basic structure of the building was still intact. Emergency lights still flickered in some places, powered by who knew what. Deep in the complex, they found what Sarah was looking for. It was a chamber that had not been there 50 years ago. The walls were covered in what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft light. In the center of the room stood something that might have been a computer, if computers were made of bone and flesh instead of metal and circuits. "Biological data storage," King observed. "Never seen anything like it." Sarah approached the device carefully. As she got closer, the crystals on the walls began to glow brighter. Symbols appeared on their surfaces. Not human writing, but something else. Something that hurt to look at. "It's responding to us," Hayes said nervously. "Maybe we should go," but Sarah was studying the symbols. She had spent 50 years learning about the Scourge. She could read some of their language now. "It's a catalog," she breathed. "A record of everything they've destroyed." The symbols changed, showing new images. Sarah saw worlds she didn't recognize. Species she had never heard of. All of them dead now. All of them reduced to entries in this alien database. And then she saw Earth. The image showed their homeworld as it had been before the scourge came. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents, beautiful and alive. Below it was text that Sarah could partially translate. Species designation, human, population eliminated. World converted to breeding facility. Resistance level, minimal. Sarah felt anger burning in her chest. Minimal resistance. The scourge thought humans had been easy to kill, but there was more. The catalog continued, showing other entries. Dozens. Of them, hundreds. The scourge had been destroying worlds for a very long time. Admiral, King said urgently. We need to leave. Something's coming. Sarah could hear it too, a sound like singing but wrong. Like voices that had been broken and put back together incorrectly. The scourge warriors were hunting in the ruins above them, but Sarah wasn't done yet. She pulled out a data recorder and started copying everything she could from the alien device. Names of worlds, descriptions of species, methods of destruction. The scourge had made a mistake. They had built this archive in the place where they had nearly caught Dr. Webb 50 years ago. They had no idea that humans would ever return to see it. Got it, Sarah said as she finished the download. Let's go. They made their way back through the complex as quietly as they could. The singing was getting closer. Through gaps in the alien growth, Sarah could see shapes moving in the darkness. Things with too many limbs and eyes that glowed like stars. They reached their ship just as the first scourge warrior emerged from the ruins behind them. It was 12 feet tall and covered in armor that looked like black glass. Its head was wrong, with a mouth that opened in 3 directions and teeth like needles. King shot it with his energy rifle. The beam cut through its armor and it fell, but its death scream brought others running. Move! Sarah shouted. The ship lifted off as more warriors poured out of the ruins. Some of them had wings and tried to follow, but the ship was too fast and too well armed. Energy beams cut them down as they rose into the poisoned sky. Within minutes they were back in space, heading for the rendezvous point where the rest of the fleet was waiting. What did we find down there? Hayes asked as they jumped to hyperspace. Sarah looked at the data recorder in her hands. It contained the records of every species the scourge had destroyed. Every world they had conquered. Every civilization they had erased. We found proof, she said. Proof that they're not just destroying humans. They're destroying everyone. The data showed the true scope of the scourge's crimes. They had been moving through the galaxy for thousands of years, leaving nothing but dead worlds behind them. They didn't just kill for territory or resources. They killed because they enjoyed it. But they had also made an error. They had underestimated their enemies. The catalog listed every species as showing minimal resistance, even the ones with advanced technology and powerful weapons. The scourge thought they were facing primitive animals. They had no idea that some of those animals had learned to bite back. Back at the fleet's hidden base, Sarah presented her findings to the command staff. The reaction was exactly what she had hoped for. They think we're extinct, said Commander Vega, looking at the data. They have no idea we're still out here. Better than that, Sarah replied. They think we were weak. They don't expect us to fight back because none of their other victims ever did. Captain Rodriguez studied the star charts they had copied from the archive. According to this, they have major bases in 12 systems, all of them built on the graves of dead civilizations. Sarah nodded. And now we know where they are. We can plan our attacks to hit all of them at once. Dr. Webb, now very old but still sharp, leaned forward in his chair. The plague weapons are ready, Sarah. We can load them into missile warheads. Whenever you give the order? Sarah looked around the room at her officers. These were the children and grandchildren of Earth's survivors. They had been born in exile and raised for war. For 50 years they had prepared for this moment. Gentlemen, ladies, she said, it's time to teach the galaxy something important. It's time to show them what happens when you hurt humans and think you can get away with it. The meeting broke up with orders flying in all directions. Ships to be positioned, weapons to be loaded, messages to be sent to the other human fleets scattered throughout space. But Sarah stayed behind to look at the data one more time, all those dead worlds, all those extinct species, all those civilizations that had been reduced to nothing but entries in an alien catalog. The Scourge thought they were the masters of the galaxy. They thought nothing could stand against them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Humans remembered, and when humans remembered, they always came back. The Scourge had saved one human 50 years ago. One scientist with a data core full of their secrets. They had thought they were being merciful. But mercy was something humans had forgotten how to show. Now it was time for the galaxy to see what humanity had learned in its years of exile. It was time to see what happened when you tried to exterminate a species that refused to die. It was time for the Scourge to pay for their crimes. And the price was going to be everything they had? The first attack came like a whisper in the dark. The Scourge mining station at Proxima Centauri was processing asteroid or when its main reactor suffered what appeared to be a catastrophic failure. The explosion took out half the facility and killed 300 Scourge workers. The survivors reported it as an accident, equipment failure. These things happened 2 days later. A Scourge transport ship in the Volf system lost navigation control and crashed into its own supply depot. Another accident. The ship's biological computer had apparently malfunctioned. A week after that, a Scourge hive ship suffered a reactor breach while in orbit around Vega Prime. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. The local Scourge commanders blamed faulty maintenance. Admiral Sarah Chun smiled as she read the reports. Her stealth teams were doing exactly what she had trained them to do. Strike fast, strike silent, and make it look like accidents. Phase 1 is working perfectly, reported Commander Torres, her operations chief. The Scourge have no idea they're under attack. Sarah nodded. Good, what about the other operations? Team 7 rescued 43 survivors from the labor camps on Kepler Station. Team 3 planted sensors throughout the Tau system. And Team 5 made contact with a group of alien survivors hiding in the asteroid belt. That last report made? Sarah paused. Alien survivors? Yes, Admiral. A species called the Mektar. Apparently the Scourge tried to exterminate them 15 years ago, but some escaped. They'd been hiding and fighting a guerrilla war ever since. Sarah felt a spark of excitement. If there were other species still fighting the Scourge, humanity wasn't alone in this war. Set up a meeting, she ordered. I want to talk to them. 3 days later, Sarah found herself in a hidden base built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The Mektar were strange creatures, tall and thin with 4 arms and silver skin that seemed to shift color based on their emotions. Their leader, who called herself Swift Strike, studied Sarah with large black eyes. So, Swift Strike said in accented English, the humans live. We thought your species was dead. We let the Scourge think that, Sarah replied. It made it easier to plan our revenge. Swift Strike's skin turned a darker silver. Sarah's translator told her this indicated approval. Revenge. Yes, we understand revenge. Swift Strike gestured to the walls around them, which were covered in what looked like memorial plaques. The Scourge destroyed 17 of our worlds, killed billions of our people. We have been fighting them ever since. What can you tell us about their operations? Sarah asked. They are creatures of habit. Always the same pattern. Send scouts, deploy the plague, wait for everything to die, then move in with the harvesters. Swift Strike's skin shifted to red, indicating anger. They think they are perfect. They think nothing can surprise them. But something can. You, Swift Strike pointed at Sarah. They think humans are extinct. They have let their guard down in your old territory. Our scouts report only minimal defenses around Earth. Sarah's heart beat faster. How minimal? Perhaps 50 hive ships in orbit, a few hundred fighters. They use Earth as a breeding world now, not a fortress. Sarah could hardly believe it. For 50 years, the human fleet had been preparing to fight through massive defenses to reach their homeworld. But if the Scourge thought humans were extinct, they would have moved most of their forces elsewhere. There's something else, Swift Strike continued. The Scourge have a weakness. Their hive minds are connected across vast distances by biological transmitters, nodes that carry their communications and coordinate their attacks. If we could destroy those nodes, their fleets would be cut off from central command. Each hive ship would have to think for itself. They are not good at that. Sarah smiled. This was exactly the kind of information she needed. Would the Mektar be willing to fight alongside humans? Swift Strike's skin turned bright gold. We have been waiting 50 years for someone to ask us that question. Over the following weeks, Sarah met with other survivors. The Korlani, a peaceful trader species that had lost their homeworld 20 years ago. The Vreks, warriors who had fought the Scourge to a standstill in the Outer Rim. The Zalani, who had been reduced to less than 1,000 individuals but still refused to surrender. Each species had its own skills. The Korlani knew the locations of hidden supply routes. The Vreks had developed weapons that could penetrate Scourge armor. The Zalani were experts at biological warfare, and all of them wanted the same thing: to make the Scourge pay for what they had done. It's perfect, Dr. Webb said when Sarah reported back to the human fleet. We're not just fighting for revenge anymore. We're fighting for justice. For every species the Scourge has destroyed. The old scientist was excited in a way Sarah hadn't seen since he first developed the plague weapon. His daughter, Dr. Elena Webb, had taken over most of his work, but the old man still supervised the final preparations. The weapons are ready, Elena reported. We can load them into missiles, deploy them as mines, or even use them in atmospheric bombardment. The plague will hunt down every Scourge organism it encounters and destroy them from the inside out. Sarah studied the deployment plans. How long will it take to work? Hours, not days. The plague spreads fast and kills faster. By the time they realize what's happening, it will be too late to stop it. Sarah nodded. Good, because we're going to need every advantage we can get. The plan was ambitious. 12 human fleets would attack 12 different Scourge systems simultaneously. Each attack would target the biological communication nodes that Swift Strike had identified. Once the nodes were destroyed, the Scourge fleets would be isolated and confused. Then would come the real assault. Earth and the other major Scourge bases would face the full fury of humanity's revenge. But first, they needed to test their new weapons. Sarah chose a small Scourge outpost in an uninhabited system. Just one hive ship and a few support vessels. Perfect for a field test. The attack came without warning. Human stealth ships dropped out of hyperspace and launched their missiles before the Scourge could react. The warheads contained Dr. Webb's improved plague, designed specifically to kill alien organisms. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Scourge ship's biological hull began to dissolve as the plague ate through its living systems. The crew died within minutes as the weapons spread through their ship's atmosphere. Even their technology failed as the plague consumed the biological components that made it work. Within an hour, the entire outpost was dead. Nothing remained but empty shells drifting in space. Sarah watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. The weapon worked exactly as Dr. Webb had promised. The Scourge's own biology had become their weakness. Phase 2 is complete, she announced to her fleet commanders. All stealth teams report successful node destruction in their assigned systems. The Scourge communication network is down. Around the galaxy, Scourge commanders were discovering that they could no longer contact their central command. Their hive minds, which had always worked in perfect coordination, were suddenly isolated and confused. Some tried to retreat to defensive positions. Others attempted to maintain their patrol routes without orders. A few simply stopped moving altogether, waiting for instructions that would never come. It was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. Phase 3 begins now, she announced. All fleets, move to your attack positions. It's time to go home. The largest human fleet, commanded by Sarah herself, jumped to the edge of the Sol system. Through her viewports, she could see Earth hanging in space like a diseased fruit. But now she knew it was not as heavily defended as they had feared. Admiral, reported Captain Rodriguez, Sensors show 57 hive ships in Earth orbit. No sign they've detected us yet. Sarah looked around her bridge at the officers who had served with her for decades. These were the children of refugees, raised in exile, trained for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we're going home. And we're bringing justice with us." The human fleet moved toward Earth like an avenging angel. Behind them came ships from a dozen other species, all united in their hatred of the Scourge. All ready to fight for the right to exist. Sarah thought about Dr. Webb, who had started this war with a single data core clutched in his dying hands. She thought about all the humans who had died defending Earth 50 years ago. She thought about all the species the Scourge had destroyed over the centuries. Today, that would end. Today, the galaxy would learn that some species don't just roll over and die when you try to exterminate them. Today, humanity was coming home, and they were bringing war with them. The Scourge had made one fatal mistake 50 years ago. They had shown mercy to their enemies. They had let one human live long enough to learn their secrets. Now they were going to pay the price. For that mercy, the price was everything they had built, everything they had conquered, everything they were. Sarah smiled as her fleet approached Earth's orbit. The Scourge thought they were the masters of the galaxy. They were about to discover they were wrong. The battle for Earth began at exactly 0800 hours. Terran Standard Time. Admiral Sarah Chun gave the order that humanity had been waiting 50 years to hear. All ships, open fire. 200 human warships dropped their stealth fields and unleashed hell upon the Scourge fleet orbiting Earth. Energy beams cut through space like lightning. Missiles streaked toward their targets, trailing fire. The darkness between the worlds lit up with the fury of humanity's return. The Scourge were caught completely off guard. Their hive ships had been floating in lazy orbits around Earth, confident that no threat could reach them. Their communication nodes had been destroyed days ago, leaving them isolated and confused. When the human attack began, they reacted like a nest of insects that had been kicked. Ships scattered in all directions, firing wildly at targets they could barely see, but it was too late. The humans had planned this assault for half a century. Every ship knew its target. Every captain knew the plan. "Direct hit on Hive Ship 7, reported Commander Torres. "Hull breach spreading. They're losing atmosphere." "Hive Ship 12 is trying to ram us," called out Captain Rodriguez. "Evasive maneuvers." Sarah watched the battle unfold on her command screens. The Scourge ships were larger than the human vessels, but they were slow and clumsy without their central coordination. The human ships danced around them like wolves attacking a herd of cattle. "Admiral," called her communications officer, "we're receiving signals from the other fleets." "Attacks have begun in all 12 target systems," Sarah nodded. Across the galaxy, human forces were striking at Scourge bases simultaneously. The aliens had never faced a coordinated attack on this scale. They had no idea how to respond, but the real surprise was yet to come. "Launch the plague missiles," Sarah ordered, throughout the human fleet. Weapons bays opened and missiles streaked toward Earth, but these were not ordinary explosives. Each warhead contained Dr. Webb's greatest creation, the Scourge's own plague. Virus modified to kill them instead of humans. The missiles detonated in Earth's atmosphere, releasing clouds of the weaponized plague into the air. Within minutes, it began to spread across the planet's surface. The effect was immediate and terrible. The massive hive cities that covered Earth began to collapse as the plague ate through their biological foundations. Scourge warriors died by the millions as the virus consumed them from within. Even their technology failed as the plague destroyed the living components that made it work. Sarah watched Earth's surface through her ship's telescopes. For 50 years, their homeworld had been a diseased yellow-brown color. Now, as the plague spread, that color was changing. The alien growth was dying. The hive cities were crumbling. "My God," whispered Captain Rodriguez, "it's working. The planet is healing itself." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. After 50 years of exile, Earth was finally fighting back, but the battle was far from over. The Scourge fleet in orbit was still dangerous. and they were beginning to coordinate their defense despite the loss of their communication network. "Admiral," called the weapons officer, "3 hive ships are converging on our position. They're charging some kind of weapon." Sarah could see them on the display. 3 of the largest scourge vessels, each one the size of a city, moving together with deadly purpose. Energy was building around their forward sections, preparing to fire. "All ships, concentrate fire on those 3 targets," Sarah ordered. "Don't let them get that shot off." The human fleet responded instantly. Every weapon that could bear on the enemy ships opened fire. The space between the fleets became a wall of energy and exploding missiles, but the scourge ships kept coming. Their armor was thick and their hulls were designed to regenerate damage. The human weapons were hurting them but not stopping them. 30 seconds to firing range, reported Torres. Sarah made a decision that would have horrified her 50 years ago. "All ships, ramming speed, we take them out the hard way." The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy. It was a desperate move, but it was also something the Scourge would never expect. They thought all species were cowards who would run when faced with overwhelming odds. They had never fought humans before. The first collision came when the battleship Vengeance struck Hive Ship 4 at full speed. The human ship was smaller, but it hit like a bullet fired from a rifle. Both vessels erupted in fire and debris. The second collision followed seconds later, as the cruiser Defiance rammed Hive Ship 9. The explosion lit up half the battlefield. The third Hive ship, seeing the fate of its companions, tried to turn away, but it was too late. The destroyer Retribution, damaged but still fighting, slammed into its side and tore it open like a tin can. Sarah felt the bridge shake as debris from the explosions rained down on her flagship, but she was smiling. The desperate gambit had worked. "Remaining Scourge ships are retreating," reported Torres. "They're heading for the outer system." "Let them go," Sarah said. "We have what we came for." She looked at the displays showing Earth's surface. The plague was spreading faster than the Scourge could contain it. Their hive cities were collapsing, one by one. The alien growth that had covered the planet was withering and dying, and through the gaps in the dying alien vegetation, Sarah could see something wonderful. Green, the first glimpse of natural vegetation in 50 years. "Admiral," called the communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet. It's in English." Sarah's heart leaped. "Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was weak and crackling, but it was definitely human. "This is Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth Resistance. Is someone out there? Please respond. We've been hiding for 50 years, but the alien plague is dying. We can finally come out." Sarah grabbed the microphone with shaking hands. "Dr. Kim, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Colonial Fleet. You are not alone. Humanity has returned." The silence that followed was broken by sobbing. Then Kim's voice came back, stronger now. "Admiral... we never gave up hope. We knew someday our people would come home." Sarah closed her eyes and let the tears flow freely. Earth had not been completely dead. Some humans had survived, hidden in deep bunkers and underground cities, waiting for this day. "How many of you are there?" Sarah asked. "Maybe 10,000. Across the whole planet. We've been living like rats in the sewers, but we're alive. We kept the memory of Earth alive." 10,000. It was a tiny number compared to the billions who had died, but it was enough. It was hope. "Dr. Kim, this is over. The Scourge are finished. We're coming down to help with the cleanup." Sarah turned to her staff. "Begin landing operations. I want medical teams on the surface within the hour, and get me a connection to the other fleets. I want to know how the other attacks went." The reports came in over the next few hours, and they were everything Sarah had hoped for. 12 Scourge systems had been attacked simultaneously. In every case, the alien defenses had crumbled once their communication networks were cut. The plague weapons had worked perfectly, killing Scourge organisms while leaving other life forms untouched. But the best news came from the alien survivors who had joined the fight. "The Mektar report complete success," said Commander Vega. "They've reclaimed 3 of their lost worlds. The Vreks have destroyed the Scourge fleet that was besieging their homeworld. Even the Korlani are talking about rebuilding their civilization. Sarah nodded. This had been more than just a war of revenge. It had been a war of liberation. Dozens of species were now free from the Scourge threat. What about the Scourge themselves? Sarah asked. Any survivors? A few scattered fleets in remote systems. But without their central command structure, they're just isolated groups. The other species are hunting them down. Sarah felt a deep satisfaction. The Scourge had spent thousands of years destroying civilizations and exterminating species. Now, they would learn what it felt like to be hunted. Admiral, called Captain Rodriguez, we're ready to land on Earth. Your shuttle is prepared. Sarah nodded. After 50 years in exile, she was finally going home. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, passing through clouds that were already beginning to clear as the alien contamination died away. Below, the landscape was a mixture of destruction and rebirth. The hive cities were collapsing into rubble, but green shoots were already pushing through the alien debris. They landed in what had once been Central Park in New York. The city around them was in ruins, but human survivors were emerging from hidden shelters. They looked thin and scared, but they were alive. Dr. Kim was waiting for them. She was an older woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much suffering, but she was smiling as Sarah stepped off the shuttle. Welcome home, Admiral, she said. Sarah looked around at the ruins of humanity's greatest city. It would take decades to rebuild, maybe longer. But they would rebuild. That's what humans did. Dr. Kim, Sarah said, I need you to help me with something. We need to send a message to every species in the galaxy. A message they'll remember. What kind of message? Sarah smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. We need to tell them what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. We need to make sure this never happens again. The message that went out from Earth was simple and direct. It was broadcast in every known language to every inhabited world in the galaxy. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Colonial Fleet. Speaking from Earth, 50 years ago, the Scourge tried to exterminate humanity. They destroyed our world and killed billions of our people. They thought they had succeeded. They were wrong. The Scourge saved one of us. One scientist who learned their secrets and spent 50 years turning their own weapons against them. Today, the Scourge Empire is finished. Their fleets are destroyed. Their worlds are dead. Their species faces extinction. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can destroy humanity and walk away. We remember, we learn, we adapt. And when we return, we bring justice with us. Earth is free, humanity survives, and we will never forget what was done to us. The message spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On 1,000 worlds, species that had lived in fear of the Scourge celebrated their liberation. On other worlds, potential conquerors thought twice about their plans for expansion. Humanity was back, and the galaxy would never be the same. Sarah stood on the balcony of what had once been the United Nations building. Looking out over the ruins of New York, construction crews were already at work, clearing away the alien debris and preparing to rebuild. Dr. Webb had lived to see this day. The old scientist had died peacefully in his sleep, just hours after receiving word that the plague weapons had worked perfectly. His last words had been, "We did it. We actually did it." Yes, Sarah thought, they had done it. The Scourge were finished. Earth was free. And humanity had proven once again that they were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they never gave up, never surrendered, never forgot the Scourge had made one fatal mistake 50 years ago. They had shown mercy to their enemies. Humanity would not make the same error. From now on, anyone who threatened Earth or its people would face the full fury of human revenge. And that revenge would be swift, complete, and absolutely merciless. The galaxy had been warned. Sarah smiled and went back to work. There was a civilization to rebuild and a universe to protect, but first, she had a promise to keep to an old friend. She walked to the memorial wall that had been erected in the ruins of the old medical complex. There, carved in stone, were the Names of every human who had died defending Earth 50 years ago. At the top of the list was the name of Dr. Marcus Webb. "We did it, Marcus," she whispered. "We came home, we remembered. And we struck back." The wind carried her words across the healing landscape of Earth, where green shoots were pushing through the alien rubble and children were playing in the ruins of the old world. Humanity was home. And they were never leaving again.